Today I have with me Ethan. Ethan is an inspirational speaker and a mental health advocate. I actually met Ethan in Houston, and his story really inspired me. And so, Ethan, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm actually glad to be a part of this. I know you're reaching out and trying to inspire a lot of your peers and people in social media world. So I applaud you for doing this, because it takes a lot of guts to talk about mental health, and it takes a lot of strength to reach out to your peers because it's been so taboo for so long. So kudos to you. Keep doing what you're doing. So my story starts really all the way back in middle school, where I was dealing with a pain inside. I didn't know what it was. And after years and years of battling this darkness that was inside, I came to realize that I was dealing with depression. And when you're dealing with mental health and you're dealing with depression or anxiety, and especially at that age of being in middle school, where popularity and peer pressure is so important. I was walking around my junior high wanting to die every day, but nobody could see that in me because I put on this front. And I was embarrassed of it because I thought I was the only person going through this. Like, I have a great family and I have this great life, and I wasn't facing all these horrible opportunities or obstacles. I was just a normal kid. And so why was I dealing with this stuff inside? So I thought there was something wrong with me. And so I kept hiding it. And over the years, I started to use drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism. And what ended up happening is I became a full-fledged alcoholic and ended up drinking myself out of college basketball scholarships. And I ended up losing 5 college basketball scholarships because of alcoholism, depression, and I became a drug addict. I ended up not only using alcohol and weed, but I started popping pills and ecstasy and cocaine, and was really going down these dark paths, and spent about 2 years where I was drinking every day to die. And I would drink and drink and drink, and I would just hope and I would pray that I wouldn't wake up the next day. And then I'd wake up and do it all over again. And I didn't know what was going on until finally my dad told me to see a psychologist. And I went and saw a psychologist when I was 23 years old and was diagnosed with severe depression. Back then, they called it manic depression, so bipolar. So I had these highs and lows of extreme elation, but I had these months of just an indescribable darkness, like you just live in your bedroom with no lights, and that's how you walk through life. Now, what really is worse about all of this is I ended up drinking so much at a house party one night that I ended up drinking and driving, and ended up killing an innocent person because I got behind the wheel and blacked out, and woke up in a hospital and found out that I drunk drove and killed somebody. And my whole entire life has been flipped upside down since that moment. And you can probably tell this is 16 years later, and I'm still emotional over this. It's rough. Every day it's rough. And how we met is I've dedicated my life after going through prison and doing my time that I deserve to do because of what happened. I went back to school and played college basketball and coached college basketball and changed my whole life and got all these degrees. But everything that I've been doing is trying to be a better person and a better human being, and telling my story to prevent other people from drinking and driving. But it's also turned into this mental health advocacy where I will never blame my depression or alcohol on me getting behind that vehicle that night.
Yeah.
That was something that I did. And I don't want anybody to ever think that I blame my depression or alcohol on it, because it was my choice that I didn't seek help. It was my choice to choose to drink those nights. But I wish I would have handled it a lot different. I wish I would have seen a counselor. I wish I would have asked for help, because then maybe I never get put in that situation. But like you've seen, I've taken full accountability for what happened in 2003, and I can never blame anybody for that night. That's on me to the day that I die. And now all I care about is helping as many youth as possible from making those choices that I make, because it can happen to any one of us. And it doesn't, you don't need to be an alcoholic or a drug addict. It could be the first time you drink. It could be the first time that you have one of those depressive episodes and you use a substance to deal with it, and you use too much and you wake up in a situation like me.
Wow, that's a really really inspiring, semi sad but inspiring story, because it shows you how, after everything you've been through, you're out here telling your story and telling us what to do. Now, one thing that struck me is, some of the things you mentioned, about depression, about going to school every day saying, you're going to, you don't want to live to see the next day. At that point on what was going on, do you remember what was going through your mind in any way, form, fashion? And is there any way you can remember what triggered those emotions or what triggered that state of depression?
So I attribute it to, I know what was the cause all the way back in middle school, and it was peer pressure. I was and I still am, a scrawny, skinny individual. All my brothers are 5-6 inches taller than me,
That's
so
like
I'm
me.
short. Yeah, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But I remember being so ashamed, not ashamed, but embarrassed of how tall I was. And then you mix that in with, I was zitty. I had a lot of acne growing up, and I was afraid to talk to girls. And I'll never forget getting into 8th grade and just having that moment of, I started to doubt myself. I started to go, man, I'm not cool enough. I'm not good looking enough. I can't talk to anybody. I don't know how to date. And when that happened, it wasn't that, it was that moment. It was after that, everything was thinking about that. And it snowballed to where it went from dating to, man, I'm not good at school. I'm not good at anything. And it never left my mind. And so I had that negative self-talk of, I'm not good enough. I'm not cool enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not quick enough. I'm not, just all this doubt. And, honestly, basketball was the only thing that ever really, and I don't like admitting this because my family means so much to me, but during middle school and high school, like, basketball was the only thing that saved my life, because it was the one thing I was good at, that I loved, and that I looked forward to playing all the time. And during those dark days, that was the only thing that I would latch on to. And then music. And, I'm a big hip hop dude. So Tupac was like my guy. And I really believe if it wasn't for Tupac and basketball, I don't know, you heard the story. So like 8th grade, I came home after a day of struggling, and I got in a fight with my parents. And I was so mad and angry at them. I remember just screaming out loud, like, I'm going to kill myself. And I remember going to the kitchen and grabbing a knife from the drawer, and I had it to my wrist, and my parents were like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm going to do it. And my dad ran after me, and I sprinted out to our barn. And I remember sitting and getting right across the door, and I had it to my wrist, and I was getting ready to just dig in. And then my dad like bear hugged me and like grabbed me. And, I don't know if it was just a cry for help, if I would have actually done it, but it was all that negativity of that constant doubting and negativity in my own self-talk of, I don't know if I should be here. I don't want to be here. And I'm not abnormal for that, because the reality is, and this is probably why you started this, there are millions and millions of people who are feeling and struggling this way. Yep. And this pandemic has made it even worse. So that's why I wanted to be a part of this and reached out to you to even be a part of your podcast, because what you're trying to do is help educate and inform as many people as you can of these issues, because it's a scary thing, and it doesn't matter what school you go to or how much money you have in the bank or where you grew up or what country, it impacts all of us.
I there's times where on, let's say, my personal Instagram and stuff like that, I have conversations with people, and one of the things that came up was mental health. I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm from Ghana in West Africa. And one of the things that we fail to address, or one of the things that we fail to mention, is issues like mental health. In every way, form, fashion, we don't mention mental health. We don't talk about it. And so there's a lot of people who go through depression, who go through all those crises, but always have to face the fact that they have no one to turn to and they have no one to talk to. So in a state like this, or in a form where you're like, I'm going through some difficulties or I'm going through some problems, who would you recommend, someone who is going through some of these problems, talk to? Who would you recommend we listen to? How would you recommend that we deal with such problems?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is starting a conversation, and that doesn't matter who it's with. Hopefully it's with one of your friends that you feel comfortable with, where you can just sit down and say, hey, bro, I'm struggling. I don't know what to do. I broke up with my girlfriend. I broke up with my boyfriend. My grades are just going through. I don't know who to talk to. So as a friend, that's who you need to be. And I always tell students if you see one of your friends struggling, be the first one to open that dialogue and say, hey, how's everything going? Because when you start that dialogue and that communication, it shows them that you truly care. And so for somebody like me who's struggling, when somebody opens up, it's like, okay, I can tell this person my problems and they're not going to judge me for it. And so that's the biggest thing, I think, first and foremost, is just opening communication, whether you're dealing with depression or your friend's dealing with it, to have that conversation. And then if that doesn't work with your friends, that's when you turn to a coach or a professor or a teacher or, an administrator. And if that doesn't work, then you look for your parents. And then on top of that, you have, and this is so great right now, there are so many resources out there, from 1-800 suicide hotlines to, and I'm just going to mention a couple: BetterHelp, Talkspace, 7 Cups. There's a new one out called Ginger. But those are online platforms where if you're dealing with something, you can talk to a professional. Now, the only bad problem about a lot of them is they cost money, but they're also significantly cheaper than going and seeing an actual counselor, which would be the first person I would tell you to go see. But in this world of not being able to go to, face-to-face stuff with the pandemic, online resources are the best way to go. And then that way you don't feel embarrassed or ashamed either. Because when I saw my counselor at UNC Colorado in Greeley, I had my hoodie on, like I was a basketball player, and I had my hoodie and my hat and my headphones on because I didn't want people to recognize me. And so I remember going to the counseling department and saying, like, everything, just completely ashamed. And now with technology, you can access a counselor without having to go through that embarrassment of seeing somebody. So those are the things from a resource standpoint. And one thing I try to do, and I'm only one person, is I have a student text line for students who have seen me speak, who want to reach out. And I literally have thousands and thousands of student conversations of their problems. And I do what I can as a first point of contact. But as soon as I realize like I can't help them, I tell them to go to one of those resources or go see a counselor, because when you need that, you need a professional.
Yeah. So I want to know, what is that text line that students can reach out to you, and because for me this is huge, that someone would be willing to have their time and talk to someone else about some of the problems they're facing. For me, I think it's huge. For me, I think it's selfless. I think it's very, very inspiring that you're doing that. So as many people as much as possible should know that there's someone who's ready to listen. There's someone who's ready to give them that kind of guidance and feedback when they need it. So what is that text line?
So the number for all students and people that have ever heard me speak, it's 720-515-2691. And that's my private line for anybody that wants to talk. All I want to do is just be that one person that listens. And when it comes to a point that I actually realize that I can't help you anymore, I will send you to a professional or tell you to go find somebody that's qualified to do that, because I'm not. But I want anybody to know that I care.
Yeah.
And so my Facebook, my Instagram, my Twitter, all those are actually resources as well, because those are, everybody has access to them. So efish.lifecon, my Instagram, is where I get a lot of students to reach out. You know, I'm so bad with remembering my stuff, but so for college students, it's undrafted_efish for Twitter.
Okay.
And it's also lifecon, life_con. It's my other Twitter for my nonprofit, where I get to work with middle school and high school students. So those are, you know, those are the point of contacts that you can reach out to me. But I will do everything in my power to help you understand that there are people out there that care. And you're in a position now too, where you've started this podcast. So you're another point of reference. And I hope all the listeners and the audience that you have and your social media following understand that you're there too, and you have a heart that cares. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, you know, personally, you know, as someone who is an extrovert, I love talking to people. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this, because I talk to people on a daily basis, listen to people's problems. And I think that, you know, we have a lot more in common than we think. And being able to share some of our experiences will help a wide range of people get through some things that they're going through. And I wanted to ask you this question, because I know that you mentioned, you know, going to prison and all that. Ethan, how was life in prison, and how did you, you know, overcome that obstacle?
So my prison was, let's say I got kind of lucky.
Yeah.
And that's because when I first got locked up, Colorado had what they called the Colorado State Department of Corrections Military Boot Camp Program. And that program, because it was one of the first programs I did, they kept me for a year. But I found out from staff that they kept me there for a year because there was a possibility that I could start a race war. Because I played basketball, and I told everybody, I said, I don't care if you're black or white, I just want to play basketball. And in prison, there's a lot of, you know, prison politics. And I'm the type of person, I don't care what color skin you have. I respect everybody for who they are. I don't like whatever religion you have. If you're poor, it doesn't matter. And in prison, that doesn't really happen. And you typically have to choose a side. And I didn't choose any sides because I didn't want to do that. And so boot camp was lucky. And then the rest of my 2 years in prison after that, I was actually fighting fires and taking college courses. And so prison ended up actually being kind of easy for me because I got placed in minimum security prison facilities. And that's like, I'm very, very lucky because those are where inmates want to go home. Now, if I would have got placed in, you know, your medium and your maximum security prisons, my whole entire outcome would have been possibly different.
Yeah.
Because there, it's lifetime criminals who are locked up for the rest of their lives, and they don't, like, that's their life. And, you know, for me, what they called as a short timer, I was going to be in and out in 3 years. And so I was very lucky and fortunate to be placed in the place I was. But it was, you know, I met a lot of good friends in there, and there's a lot of guys in there that I trust almost more than the people that I know back home, because I was with them 24 hours a day, locked up in, like, at one of my facilities, I could literally touch elbow to elbow, and there's two of us living in a closet. That's how big our cell was. So you get to know people really quick. And you know, you have to respect people. And I think that's the biggest thing too that I learned from prison is, if you just show respect and you treat people as humans and it doesn't matter what gang they're from or where they grew up. But if we're all humans and you just show that respect, people can get along.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important, especially, you know, with how this world is right now. You know, the US is going through all this social injustice, and we're human beings, man. Like, if you just treat each other as friends and family, like, we wouldn't have these issues.
Yeah.
And that hurts me. It sucks.
That's a pretty really really touching story. I I saw in your bio, you know, I listened to you, and you mentioned how you went back to school. You know, you got some degrees and stuff in the back. How was that transition for you? Like, you know, after even during the school times and reminiscing some of the things that you've been through already in, let's say, your school times in the past. How was that transition, and how was it, you know, getting in and saying you're going to do this?
Yeah. So, you know, I went to prison for 3 years, did a year and a halfway house and a year on what they call inmate status on an ankle monitor. And so it's 5 years total is how long I've been in the system. And then I transferred down to Denver to play college basketball. And I played college basketball as an inmate of Colorado. Like, never been done before. I had a 6 a.m. curfew. At first it was a 9 p.m. curfew, and then it was a 10 p.m. curfew. So I couldn't leave my house. I was on house arrest. And so I went to a school that was unknown for the basketball world because it was the only school I could go to. I couldn't get into any other schools. And so going back, I was 28 years old. And I was walking around campus with an ankle monitor around a bunch of 18, 19-year-old freshmen and sophomores. And it took a while for people to adjust to me, because they're like, who is this old man on campus? And why is he playing college basketball? And what is that thing on his leg? Yeah. And so I think it was easier for me to adjust because I was on one mission. I was there to play basketball and get my grades. That was it. Nothing else mattered. And everybody else kind of had to adjust to me. Like, what is this? Who is this guy? You know, like, so my teammates had to adjust to me because I couldn't practice at night because we'd have late practice. So I'd miss practices. And then during the season, I didn't even get to travel. So I only played in half of our games because I couldn't travel with my team. And while that was going on, I was so dedicated to school where I went from a GPA of 0.000 at one of my schools to I graduated with a 4.0 and 2 bachelor degrees, 3 minors, you know, the master's, entrepreneur student of the year, which I think you'll appreciate. So I won the entrepreneurship of the year award at my university.
Wow.
for the business plan that I created in prison with a bunch of inmates.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I kept all my guys in prison. Kind of, we all had a focus of trying to do something right when we got out. So we were talking about building businesses and doing all this stuff. And so I took that into the college and the university life and polished it up and made it look a lot better and actually had research and data to back it up. But when I went to school, I wanted to be the best student on campus because that was my goal. And like you've heard me speak, I literally was the best best student on campus because I ended up getting the President's Award, like the highest academic achievement you can get on campus, because I made up my mind that I was going to be the best student. Now, I will tell you, I'm not the smartest individual in the world. I just outworked every single person on that campus because I had a different sense of purpose than most people do when they're 18, 19, 20 years old. Yeah. And I've been through so much that I didn't want to let people down. And I think people that do know me during that time, I slept less than 4 hours a day, 7 days a week for almost 5. It ended up being 7 years straight with my master's because I had practice in school and I just wanted to accomplish everything that I put in my mind. And that's why school was so important. because as a felon, I got denied 3 six-figure finance jobs when I got out because I have a finance degree and I blew them all away. But people don't realize as a felon, you lose a bunch of rights. And I've never voted before because all those were taken away from me. So this is going to be, I'm actually going to vote this year because,
Wow.
yeah. So as somebody that's been in the prison system, I know how important education is. So I tell people all the time, like I speak in prisons. If you're in prison, like there is a way out, and education is a huge benefactor to being able to do something positive with your life. So school for me has been, I'm in massive amounts of college debt, but school was so important to me because I needed it. I needed it to be able to have a good life.
Wow, that's really great. That's really really good to hear because a lot of times people see college to be a waste of time and all that, but seeing it from your perspective to be a way out for let's say someone who just got out of jail, or even a regular person who would want to better themselves. I think it's huge. I think it's very 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 inspiring, very very motivating for a lot of people out there. I myself, I'm a huge. I'm actually going to get my MBA, and so I'm super excited about it. I haven't been the most pumped about college, but I always value the little things you can get from it, and those are the things that I never forget. Um, I also saw that I know you have spoken to over 1 million students. Um, I want
Not
to
that
know,
many.
not
I
that many.
wish. That's the goal. I want to
That's
get
the
to 1
goal.
million. Yeah.
Okay. I want to know for you, like anytime you go speak to anyone or speak to a group of students, uh, what what is the goal? What is the mission? What inspires you to share your story so much? Because there's a lot of people going through, really bad stuff. There's a lot of people who are going through the worst mental issues. But why you, Ethan? Why you?
So that's a fantastic question. Um, so originally, when I started speaking, it was about drunk driving prevention, um, because I believe, like, out of all the colleges I've been, I've seen thousands and thousands of students drive home drunk. I've seen business owners. I've seen fathers and mothers. I've seen uncles. Like, I've seen so many people drive drunk that was something that I could do to prevent what happened to me and what happened to Bill's family. Because that's one of those things that with the right education and awareness and a DD or, calling Uber or Lyft, you can get somebody home safe. Like, that was why I started speaking. The mental health stuff didn't come around until I actually spoke at one of my old universities at UNC Greeley in Colorado. That was the first time I ever talked about my 8th grade suicide attempt. I talked about my suicide attempt at one of the other colleges I went to. And when I had a line of Division I college athletes come up to me and talking about all the struggles that they went through, a light switched. And I said, oh, I wasn't the only college athlete going through these issues. So then I started talking about all the depression and anxiety and all these other things that were going on inside me. And it opened up this door to no longer just athletes, because everybody struggles with mental health. You have breakups, your parents, you grow up in a foster home, whatever it may be, everybody's dealing with something. And at first it was just athletics for me. And then when that opened up, I was getting theater kids, I was getting 4-H kids, I was getting every single student, because when you relate to something that everybody can go through, it broadens it open. And here's the thing about why I don't know, for me, I've been so effective. And I know firsthand that there are millions of other people who have overcome things that I couldn't even imagine. But I made a decision and chose to speak. There are people that don't want to talk about these things because The reality is when you're up on stage, you have 1,000 people who are ready to judge you. And I've gotten some bad emails, and not many, but I've gotten bad emails and comments from people. And so those types of things, I think, prevent other people from telling their story because they're scared. And, you know, one of the things I mentioned in some of my speeches is everybody has a story. Everybody has chapters in their book of life, and everybody could be a speaker.
Yeah.
It's finding what works and dedicating your life to doing that. And I've turned down college coaching jobs. I've turned down business jobs to do free speeches when I first started because I was so passionate about that. But everybody asks me like, oh, you get all these events, so how are you doing it? Well, I'm doing all these for free to build my resume up. And they're like, well, I don't want to spend that much time doing it. Well, then you don't care about speaking that much.
Yep.
And so now that I am a professional paid speaker, people are like, oh, that's really cool. You get to do all these things. They don't realize the 3.5 years that I dedicated to this, like not knowing where my mortgage payment's coming from, not knowing how I'm going to make my car payment, because I sacrificed, because I had one goal and one ambition was to be a speaker, because I wanted to tell my story. I wanted to help other people. And so I was willing to make those sacrifices. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. And that's what separates me from a lot of those other people that you mentioned with stories that you and I can't relate to because they've gone through 100 times worse than me. I just decided to put my whole entire life on blast.
Yeah.
So
I think you're doing a really good job, Ethan. As I said, the first time I heard you speak, I was really inspired and really moved. And I'm happy that you're doing this because this will inspire a lot of people. And I think you're already making an impact, as you can see. You know, thank you for everything. Thank you even for coming on here because, you know, sharing your story for free, as you said, is not the most ideal thing, but you're doing it because you care about people and you care about, you know, sharing your story to make people better. So I want to really, really thank you for even doing this in the first place.
Yep.
Now, I want you to you know, maybe ending off, just give us some words of inspiration, some words of motivation for people out there, especially the young people, Gen Z, millennials out there who are trying to make a difference or who are basically struggling with some things that you've dealt with already.
Yep. So here's my 2 takeaways. 1, if you're going to drink or party, make sure you have a designated driver. Make sure you have somebody taking you home safe. Now, I would advise you not to drink. I'd advise you not to party. That's what people do. If you're going to do it and you're 21, fine. But make sure you get home safe. Make sure you have people taking care of you. Depression, anxiety, anorexia, bulimia, whatever it may be. Like if you're struggling with something and you don't know what to do, there are resources. And here's the thing, do not be afraid to ask. Be afraid to talk to somebody, because when you talk to somebody, it opens up a dialogue to where you feel safe and comfortable. And that's all I want you to do. Like if you're struggling, seek help. Don't be afraid to ask. So those are my 2 takeaways, that people are dealing with this stuff. And right now with the pandemic and people losing jobs and unemployment and being stuck in a house, we are in a world now where we can have Zoom conversations. Pick up the phone, call somebody, text somebody, but reach out to help if you're still like dealing with something. Get access to that you couldn't 10 years ago. So if you need help, go get it.
Ethan, thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. You know, just keep it up. You know, keep it up. We'll share the word as much as possible. And, you know, we'll put your social medias all over as much as we can for people to reach out to you. But, you know, every time, you know, I see even a young person or anyone devoting their time to something they're passionate about, I see a bright future. And you know, seeing what you're doing for the community, And for the nation as a whole, it's very inspiring to me personally and to a lot of people. So I just want to say from me to you, thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.